Chapter 5 of Ralph 124C41 Plus, New York, AD 2660. Being much interested in sports, she wanted to know how the modern New Yorker kept himself in condition. For the answer, Ralph stops at the corner and they enter a tall flat-roofed building. They take off their coasters, step into the electromagnetic elevator, and ascend the 50-odd stories in a few seconds. At the top they find a large expanse on which are stationed dozens of flyers of all sizes. There is a continuous bustle of departing and arriving aerial flyers and of people alighting and departing. As soon as Ralph and Alice appear, a dozen voices begin to call, "Aerocab, sir, aerocab, this way, please." Ralph ignores them, walks over to the two-seated flyer and assists his companion to the seat. He then seats himself and says briefly to the driver, "National Playgrounds." The machine, which is very light and operated entirely by electricity, is built of metal throughout. It shoots up into the air with terrific speed and then takes a northeasterly direction at a rate of 10 miles per minute, or 600 miles per hour. From the great height at which they are flying, it is not hard to point out the most interesting structures, towers, bridges, and wonders of construction deemed impossible several centuries ago. Pardon me. In less than 10 minutes they have arrived at the National Playgrounds. They light on an immense platform, and Ralph, leading Alice to the edge where they can see the entire playgrounds, says, "These national playgrounds are built by the city in 2490 at the extreme eastern end of what used to be Long Island, a few miles from Montauk. An immense area has been fitted up for all kinds of sports, terrestrial and aquatic as well as aerial. These municipal playgrounds are the finest in the world and represent one of New York's greatest achievements. The city government supplies all the various sports paraphernalia, and every citizen has the right to use it by applying to the lieutenants in charge of the various sections. There are playgrounds for the young as well as for the old, grounds for men, grounds for the women, grounds for babies to romp about in. There are hundreds of baseball fields, thousands of tennis courts, and uncounted football fields and golf links. It never rains, it is never too hot, and it is never too cold. The grounds are open every day in the year from 7 in the morning till 11 at night. After sunset, the grounds and fields are lighted by thousands of iridium wire spirals for those who have to work in the daytime. As a matter of fact, all the great baseball, tennis, and football contests are held after sundown. The reason is apparent. During the daytime, with the sun shining, there is always one team which has an advantage over the other on account of the light being in their eyes. In the evening, however, with the powerful stationary light overhead, each team has the same conditions and the game can be played more fairly and more accurately. Ralph and his companions stroll about the immense grounds watching the players, and it is not long before he discovers that she, like himself, is enthusiastic about tennis. He asks her if she will care to play a game with him, and she acquiesces eagerly. They walk over to the dressing building, where Ralph keeps his own sports clothes. Since the girl has no tennis shoes, he secures a pair for her in the arcade, and they saunter over to one of the courts. In the game that follows, Ralph, an expert at tennis, is too engrossed in the girl to watch his game. Consequently, he is beaten from start to finish. He does not see the ball and scarcely notices the net. His eyes are constantly on Alice, who indeed makes a remarkable pretty picture. She flings herself enthusiastically into her game, as she does with everything else that interests her. She is a true sports lover, caring little whether she wins or not, loving the game for the game itself. Her lovely face is flushed with the exercise, and her hair curls into damp little rings lying against her neck and cheeks in soft clusters. Her eyes, always bright, shine like stars. Now and again they meet Ralph in gay triumph as she counters a difficult ball. He has never imagined that anyone can be so graceful. Her lithe and flexible figure is seen to its best advantage in this game, requiring great agility. Ralph, under this bombardment of charms, is spellbound. He plays mechanically, and it must be admitted wretchedly, and he is so thoroughly and abjectly in love that he does not care. To him but one thing matters. He knows that unless he can have Alice, life itself will not matter to him. He feels that he would gladly lose 100 games when she at last flings down her racket, crying happily, "Oh, I won, didn't I?" "You certainly did," he cried. "You were wonderful." "I'm a little bit afraid you let me win," she pouts. "It really wasn't fair of you." "You were fine. I was hopelessly outclassed from the beginning. You have no idea how beautiful you were. More beautiful than I ever dreamed anyone could be." Before his ardent eyes she draws back a little, half pleased, half frightened, and not a little confused. Sensing her embarrassment, he instantly becomes matter of fact. "Now," he says, "I'm going to show you the source of New York's light and power." A few minutes later, after both have changed their shoes, they are again seated in an aerocab, and a 20-minute journey brings them well into the center of what is formerly New York State. They light on the immense plain on which 12 monstrous meteoro towers, each 1,500 feet high, are stationed. These towers form a hexagon, inside of which are the immense heliodynamophores, or sun-power generators. The entire expanse, 20 kilometers square, is covered with glass. Underneath the heavy plate glass squares are the photoelectric elements, which transform the solar heat directly into electric energy. The photoelectric elements, of which there are 400 to each square meter, are placed in large, movable metal cases, each case containing 1,600 photoelectric units. Each metal case, in turn, is movable and mounts on a kind of large tripod in such a manner that each case from sunrise to sunset presents its glass plate directly to the sun. The rays of the sun consequently strike the photoelectric elements always vertically, never obliquely. A small electric motor inside of the tripod moves the metal case so as to keep the plates always facing the sun. In order that one case might not take away the light from the one directly behind it, all cases are arranged in long rows, each sufficiently far away from the one preceding it. Thus, shadows from one row cannot fall on the row behind it. At sunrise, all cases will be almost vertical, but at this time very little current is generated. 1 hour after sunset, the plant is working to its full capacity. By noon, the cases are all in a horizontal position, and by sunset they again are in an almost vertical position, in the opposite direction, however, from that of the morning. The plant will work at its full capacity until 1 hour before sunset. Each case generates about 120 kilowatts, almost as long as the sun is shining, and it is easily understood what enormous power the entire plant can generate. In fact, this plant supplies all the power, light, and heat for entire New York. One half of the plant is for day use, while the other half during daytime charges the chemical gas accumulators for night use. In 1909, Cove of Massachusetts invented a thermoelectric sun power generator which can deliver 10 volts and 6 amps, or 1/60th kilowatt, in a space of 12 square feet. Since that time, inventors by the score have busied themselves to perfect solar generators. But it is not until the year 2469 that the Italian 63A1243 invents the photoelectric cell, which revolutionizes the entire electrical industry. This Italian discovers that by derivatives of the radium M class in conjunction with tellurium and arcturium, a photoelectric element can be produced which is strongly affected by the sun's ultraviolet rays, and in this condition is able to transform heat directly into electrical energy without losses of any kind. After watching the enormous power plant for a time, Alice remarks, "Well, of course, have similar plants across the water, but I have never seen anything of such magnitude. It is really colossal, but what gives the sky above such a peculiar black tint?" In order not to suffer too great losses from the atmospheric disturbances, the 12 giant meteoro towers, which you notice, are working with full power as long as the plant is in operation. Thus, a partial vacuum is produced above the plant, and the air consequently is very thin. As air ordinarily absorbs an immense amount of heat, it goes without saying that the heliodynamophore plant obtains an immensely greater amount of heat when the air above it is clear and very thin. In the morning, the towers direct their energy toward the east in order to clear the atmosphere to a certain degree, and in the afternoon their energy is directed toward the west for the same purpose. For this reason, the plant furnishes fully 30% more energy than others working in ordinary atmosphere. As it is growing late, they return to the city, traversing the distance to Ralph's home in less than 10 minutes. Alice's father arrives a few minutes later, and she tells him of the delightful time she has had in the company of their distinguished host. Shortly after they have dined that evening, Ralph takes his guests down to his teletheater. This large room has a shallow stage at one end with proscenium, arch, and curtain such as has been in use during the whole history of the drama. At the rear of the room is scattered a number of big upholstered chairs. When they have seated themselves, Ralph gives Alice a directory of the plays and operas that are being presented that night. "Oh, I see they are playing the French comic opera La Normandie at the National Opera tonight," she exclaims. "I have heard and read so much of it. I should like to hear it so much." "With the greatest of pleasure," Ralph replies. "In fact, I have not heard it myself. My lab has kept me so busy that I have missed the opera several times already. There are only 2 performances a week now." He walks over to a large switchboard from which hangs numerous cords and plugs. He inserts one of the plugs into a hole labeled National Opera. He then manipulates several levers and switches and seats himself again with his guest. In a moment a gong sounds and the lights are gradually dimmed. Immediately afterward the orchestra begins the overture. A great number of loud-speaking telephones are arranged near the stage, and the acoustics are so good that it is hard to realize that the music originates 4 miles away at the National Opera House. When the overture is over, the curtain rises on the first act. Directly behind it, several hundred especially constructed telephots are arranged in such a manner as to fill out the entire space of the shallow stage. These telephots are connected in series and are joined together so cleverly that no break or joint is visible in the rear part of the stage. The result is that all objects on the distant stage of the National Opera are projected full size on the composite telephot plates on the Theatre stage. The illusion is so perfect in all respects that it is extremely hard to imagine that the actors on the telephot stage are not real flesh and blood. Each voice can be heard clearly and distinctly because the transmitters are close to the actors at all times, and it is not necessary to strain the ear to catch any passages. Between the acts, Ralph explains that each New York playhouse now has over 200,000 subscribers, and it is easy for the Berlin and Paris subscribers to hear and see the play as for the New York subscribers. On the other hand, he admits that the Paris and Berlin, as well as the London playhouses, have a large number of subscribers, local as well as long distance, but New York's subscription list is by far the largest. "Can you imagine," muses Alice, "how the people in former centuries must have been inconvenienced when they wished to enjoy a play? I was reading only the other day how they had to prepare themselves for the theatre hours ahead of time. They had to get dressed especially for the occasion, and even went so far as to have different clothes in which to attend theatres or operas. And then they had to ride or perhaps walk to the playhouse itself. Then the poor things, if they did not happen to like the production, had either to sit all through it or else go home. They probably would have rejoiced at the ease of our teletheatres, where we can switch from one play to another in 5 seconds until we find the one that suits us best. Nor could their sick people enjoy themselves seeing a play as we can now. I know when I broke my ankle a year ago, I actually lived in the teletheatre. I cannot imagine how I could have dragged myself through those dreary 6 weeks in bed without a new play every night. Life must have been dreadful in those days." "Yes, you are right," Ralph says. "Neither could they have imagined in their wildest dreams the spectacle I witnessed a few days ago. I happened to be passing this room, and I heard such uproarious laughter that I decided to see what caused it all. Entering unnoticed, I found my 10-year-old nephew entertaining half a dozen of his friends. The little rascal had plugged in a matinee performance of Romeo and Juliet playing at the Broadway, in English, of course. Then he plugged in at the same time into Dr. Spitzbub, a farce playing that evening in Berlin. And to this, for good measure, he added Rigoletto, in Italian, playing at the Gala in Milan. The effect, of course, was horrible. Most of the time nothing but a babble of voices and music could be heard, but once in a while a single voice broke through the din, followed immediately by another one in a different language. The funniest incident was when, at the Broadway, Juliet called, 'Romeo, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo?' and a heavy comedian at the Berlin Theatre howled, 'Mir ist's Wurst, schlagt ich tot.' Of course, everything on the stage was blurred most of the time, but once in a while extremely ludicrous combinations resulted between some of the actors at the various theatres, which were greeted with an uproar by the youngsters. As he concluded the anecdote, the curtain rises once more, and the audience of three settles back to enjoy the second act of the opera. Later, when it is all over, they go down to the street floor at Ralph's suggestion, where they put on their telemotor coasters preparatory to seeing more of New York, this time by night. The party proceeds to roll down Broadway, the historic thoroughfare of New York. Despite the fact that it is 11 o'clock at night, the streets are almost as light as at noonday. They are illuminated brightly by the iridium spirals hanging above the crossings. These spirals give forth a pure dazzling white light of the same quality as sunlight. This light, moreover, is absolutely cold, as all electrical energy is transformed into light, none being lost in heat. Not a street is dark, not even the smallest alley. James, as well as his daughter, linger over the superb displays in the various stores, and they enter several to make a few purchases. Alice is much impressed with the automatic electric packing machines. The clerk making the sale places the purchased articles on a metal platform. He then pushes several buttons on a small switchboard, which operates the size apparatus to obtain their dimensions. After the last button is pressed, the platform rises about 2 feet till it disappears into a large metal box-like contrivance. In about 10 to 15 seconds, it comes down again, bearing on its surface a neat white box with a handle at the top, all in one piece. The box is not fastened with any strings or tape, but is folded in an ingenious manner so that it cannot open on its own accord. Moreover, it is made of allohydrolium, which is the lightest of all metals, being 1/8 the weight of aluminum. The automatic packing machine can pack anything from a small package a few inches square up to a box 2 feet high by 3 feet long. It makes the box to suit the size of the final package, placing the articles together, packing them into the box, which is not yet finished, folding the box after the handle has been stamped out, stenciling the firm's name on 2 sides, and delivering it completely packed, all within 10 to 15 seconds. The box can either be taken by the purchaser, or the clerk would stencil the customer's name and address into the handle, place a triangle or packet post stamp on the box, and drop it into a chute beside the counter. It is carried down into the packet post conveyor, which is from 75 to 100 feet below the level of the street, where it lands on a belt-like arrangement, moving at a rate of 5 miles an hour. The action is entirely automatic, and the chute is arranged with an automatic shutter, which will not only open where there is no package which will only open when there is no package immediately below on the moving belt. This precludes the possibility of packages tumbling on top of each other and in this way blocking the conveyor tube. When the package has landed on the conveyor belt, it travels to the nearest distributor office, where the post office clerk will take it from the belt and see if it is franked correctly. The stamp is then machine cancelled, and after the clerk has noted the address, he routes it to the substation nearest to the addressee's home. Next, he clamps onto the package an automatic metal rider, which is of a certain height, irrespective of the size of the package. The package with its rider is placed on an express conveyor belt traveling at 25 miles an hour. This express belt bearing the package moves at an even speed and never stops, passing numerous substations on the way. At the correct substation, the rider comes against a contact device stretching across the belt at right angles at a certain height. The contact arrangement closes the circuit of a powerful electromagnet placed in the same line with the contact a few feet away from the express belt. The electromagnet acts immediately on the metal package. Allohydrolium is a magnetic metal, drawing it in a flash into the substation from the belt. If there is another package right behind the ones drawn out, it is handled in the same manner. After the package has arrived at the substation, it is dispatched to its final destination. Another rider is attached to it, and the package placed on the local conveyor belt passing by the house to which it is addressed. On arriving at the correct address, its rider will strike the contact overhead, which operates the electromagnet, pulling the package into the basement of the house, where it falls on the platform of an electric dumbwaiter. The dumbwaiter starts up automatically, and the package is delivered at once. By this method, a package can be delivered in the average space of 40 minutes from the time of purchase. Some packages can be delivered in a much shorter time, and others, which have to travel to the city limits, take much longer. "How wonderful," Alice explains after Ralph has explained the system. "It must have taken decades to build such a stupendous system." "No, not quite. It was built gradually by an enormous number of workers. The tubes are even now extended almost daily to keep pace with the growth of the city." From the stores, Ralph takes his guest to the roof of an aerocab stand, and they board a fast flyer. "Take us up about 10,000 feet, Ralph instructs the driver. You haven't much time. At 12 o'clock, all cabs must be out of the air. Why? Today is the 15th of September, the night of the aerial carnival, and it's against the law to go up over New York until it's all over. You have 25 minutes left, however, if you wish to go up. I forgot all about the aerial carnival, says Ralph, but 25 minutes will be time enough for us if you speed up your machine. The aerial flyer rises quickly and silently. The objects below seem to shrink in size, and within 3 minutes the light becomes fainter. In 10 minutes, an altitude of 12,000 feet has been reached, and as it becomes too cold, Ralph motions to the driver not to rise further. The spectacle below them is indescribably beautiful. As far as the eye can see is a broad expanse studded with light, like the carpet embroidered with diamonds. Thousands of aerial craft, their powerful searchlights sweeping the skies, move silently through the night, and once in a while an immense transatlantic aerial liner will swish by at a tremendous speed. Most beautiful of all, as well as wonderful, were the signalizers. Ralph points them out to his guests, saying, in the first period of aerial navigation, large electric lamps forming figures and letters were placed on housetops and in open fields that the aerial craft might find better their destinations. To the traffic flying 5,000 feet or higher, such signals are wholly inadequate, as they cannot be correctly read at such a distance. Hence the signalizers. These are powerful searchlights of the most advanced type mounted on special buildings. They are trained skyward and shoot a powerful shaft of light directly upward. No aerial craft is allowed to cross these light shafts. Each shaft gives a different signal. Thus the signalizer in Herald Square is first white, in 10 seconds changes to red, and in 10 seconds to yellow. Even an aerial liner at sea can recognize the signal and steer directly into the Herald Square pier without being obliged to hover over the city in search of it. Some signalizers have only one color flashing from time to time. Others, more important, use 2 searchlights at one time, like the one at Sandy Hook. The signalizers has 2 light shafts, one green, one red. These do not change color, nor do they light periodically. From on high, Ralph's guests marvel at these signalizers which pierce the darkness all around them. It is a wonderful sight, and the weird beauty of the colored shafts thrill Alice immeasurably. Oh, it is like fairyland, she exclaims. I could watch it forever. But presently the aerocab is descending rapidly, and in a few minutes the strong light from below has obliterated the light shafts. As the craft draws closer, the streets can be seen extending for miles like white ribbons, and the brilliantly lighted squares stand out prominently. They land at the stroke of 12, and Ralph finds 3 unoccupied chairs on the top of one of the public buildings, and only then do they notice that hundreds of people are seated watching the sky expectantly. At the last stroke of 12, all the lights below go out, and simultaneously the light shafts of all the searchlights. Everything is plunged in utter darkness. Suddenly, overhead, at a great height, the flag of the United States in immense proportions is seen. It is composed of 6,000 flyers, all together in the same horizontal plane. Each flyer is equipped with very powerful lights on the bottom, some white, some red, some blue. Thus an immense flag in its natural colors is formed, and so precisely do the flyers cooperate that although they are at least 50 feet from each other, the appearance to those below is that of an unbroken silk flag, illuminated by a searchlight. The immense flag begins to move. It passes slowly overhead, describing a large circle so that the entire population below obtains a perfect view. Everyone applauds the demonstration. Then, as suddenly as it has appeared, the flag vanishes and all are more in darkness. Ralph explains to his guests that the lights of each one of the aerial flyers has been shut off simultaneously in preparation for the next spectacle. All at once there is seen an enormous colored circle which revolves with great rapidity, becoming smaller and smaller, as though it is shrinking. Finally, it becomes a colored disc whirling rapidly on its axis. In a few seconds, the edge opens and a straight line shoots out, the disc unrolling like a tape measure. After a few minutes more, there remains nothing of the disc. It has resolved itself into a perfectly straight, many-hued line, miles long. The lights go out again. The next spectacle is a demonstration of the solar system. In the center, a large sun is seen standing still. Next to the sun, a small red round globe spins rapidly around it, representing the planet Mercury. Around both the sun and the planet Mercury revolve another globe, blue in color, that is Venus. Then follows a white orb, the Earth, with the moon turning about it. Next comes the red planet Mars with its 2 small moons, then green Jupiter and its moons, and Saturn in yellow. Uranus is orange, and lastly comes Neptune in pink, all globes and their moons traveling in their proper orbits around the sun. While the spectacle is in progress, a white comet with a long tail travels across the paths of the planets. turning a sharp corner around the sun. Its tail always pointed away from that body, recrossing the orbits of the planets, again on the other side and losing itself in darkness. Several other spectacles are presented, each more superb than the one preceding it. The carnival closes with a light picture of the planet governor. This is exhibited for fully 5 minutes, during which time the applause is continuous. We have never seen such a marvelous spectacle, James says. You Americans still lead the world. Upon my word, the old saying that nothing is impossible in America still holds good. It is after 1 when they reach the house, and Ralph suggests a light lunch before they retire for what remains of the night. The others assent, and Ralph leads the way to the basilatorium. The basilatorium, invented in 2509 by the Swede IA-299, is a small room, the walls and bottom of which are composed of lead. On each of the 4 sides are large vacuum tubes on pedestals. These tubes, a foot in height and about 6 inches thick and 2 feet in diameter, are each equipped with a large concave radio-arcturium cathode. The glass of the tube in front of the cathode has a double wall, the space between being filled with helium. The rays emitting from the cathode when the tube is energized with high oscillatory currents are called arcturium rays and will instantly destroy any bacilli exposed to them for a few seconds. Arcturium rays, like X-rays, pass through solid objects and when used alone burn the tissue of the human body. It is found, however, that by filtering arcturium rays through helium, no burns will result, but any germ or bacillus in or on the body will be killed at once.